Believe it or not, this is a story about suburban life in America and about the great migration from the cities to the suburbs of African Americans. It's about race and real estate. As with the white suburban migration, which preceded it by 50 years, the black migration was led by successful professional people, like Don Braden.
We were looking for a place to that was big enough to have children. We were childless at the time, and we were looking for a backyard that we could do a garden and hang in, you know, do the suburban adventure.
And John Lee.
I lived in Midtown Manhattan for 15 years, and coming off the road and being stressed and tired, you know, like that, I just wanted more space and a more peaceful atmosphere.
And the late Earl May, who died during the making of this report and to whom it is dedicated.
I've heard people come from that live in Brooklyn and New York, and they will say, you know, they're going to move to South Orange because the schools are so great.
And Thelonious Monk Jr., T.S. Monk, all honored artists in the world of jazz. And all New York City musicians who moved their families to the small suburban town of South Orange, New Jersey.
When I moved here in 1995, I'm in my new home, and I'm standing in my backyard, and I heard this music. I heard this big band, right? And I say, wow, what is that? Where is that coming from? And there's this wonderful park, and there's a stage set up, and it was actually John Faddis leading the Carnegie Hall Jazz Band. I was convinced that I moved to the dark side of the moon in terms of the jazz when I moved to South Orange, because I've been such a New York cat.
Turned out you'd come home.
Turned out I had come home.
T.S. Monk was seeking in South Orange exactly the same things that have always driven the American suburban migration, black and white: space, schools, and security.
My son was about 6 and my daughter was about 8, and New York had become tough to grow up in. And there was a lot of crime, and so I said, you know, maybe it's time to get out.
South Orange offers a safe environment, lots of green space, and excellent schools.
You know, there are places in this country where you can still get a great public education.
We talked about Hanukkah. Yes.
And South Orange has another attraction: its diversity.
There's a large community from the continent of Africa, from countries like Ghana and Nigeria. There's a large West Indian presence, along with the African American component and even South Americans. The remarkable thing, David, and the encouraging thing for me is that in this environment, our children, they actually get the message. They don't have the time for the hatred and the bigotry that it seems that we do.
Good.
The suburbs are the most integrated social, political, and civic terrains in the United States.
What an irony that today's suburbs should showcase America's most harmonious human relations, because for decades, the force that drove the migration from the cities to the suburbs was conflict over race and class. People fleeing others whom they considered inferior.
In the late 19th, early 20th century, some people moved out because they didn't want to live around Jews and Italians and Poles. It becomes more associated with our customary identification with race after the Great Depression.
Suburbanization, which started with whites fleeing other whites, had by the 1940s become whites fleeing blacks, penned by law and custom into inner-city ghettos.
Laws changed in the 1960s, but it wasn't until the 90s that African Americans started to integrate suburban life in large numbers all across the country. Why did real change take so long? Well, various forms of economic discrimination made it harder for African Americans to accumulate the cash they needed for a down payment on a home. And then when they had their money together, racist tricks often put obstacles in their path.
The most significant obstacle might be called the obstacle of zoning, where suburbs were zoned so they would only settle, only attract people of spectacular upward mobility trajectories, people who had money.
But Professor Price, one of America's leading scholars of suburban life, says real estate agents often made sure that even blacks with money couldn't buy the best suburban homes.
Racial steering, another artful strategy to make sure that certain areas of a city would remain as white as possible for as long as possible, and blacks would be steered to some neighborhoods but not to others.
For Price, this isn't just textbook material, it's his life.
When I came to New Jersey way back in 1968, I really wanted to live in East Orange, which has these lovely buildings, some with grand views of New York City. I went, there was an ad in the newspaper. I went to the landlord of the apartment building and was told that the apartment had been rented. I disbelieved it, so I had a white friend of mine make the same journey, and she was told that the apartment was available.
Steering black people into just a few suburbs kept them locked inside new ghettos, and meant when a black suburbanite put his home up for sale, only other blacks would buy it. As a result, for every dollar that a white-owned house went up in value, a black-owned home went up by just 10 cents. The cumulative damage to African American wealth can still be measured today.
Owning a home is like the first step on the ladder towards acquiring wealth.
As long as the black suburban housing ladder was kept separate, it led to very limited wealth. Then, in the early 1990s, a new subprime mortgage market opened the suburbs to a lot of previously excluded African American homebuyers. And Americans of all races found they could live together and grow wealthy together. By the year 2000, the value of black-owned homes had grown to 65% of white properties. By 2006, it was 70%.
Moving from 65% of the value of a white-owned home to 70% of the value of a white-owned home over a 6-year period is a pretty good rate of increase. I mean, it shows that there has been progress.
If subprime mortgages helped many African Americans buy homes, they also frequently stuck them with terrible terms.
It's a mortgage that's at a higher rate. There are associated with it penalties if you prepay it. There are fees associated with it. Many of the subprime mortgages have adjustable rates, which means that you'll get the mortgage at, say, 6%, for example, and after a couple of years, 2 or 3 years usually, the rate will go up to, say, 12%, which is a big hike.
The system worked fine as long as house prices kept going up. People who fell behind on their mortgages could refinance and get fresh infusions of cash to meet ever higher monthly bills. But then the boom went bust. House prices stopped rising. Refinancing was no longer an option. And people like Valisha James were caught.
When I bought the house, we were paying around $1,200. And right now I'm paying over $1,600.
Add in taxes and insurance, and Valisha James' monthly payment tops $2,000.
Where's that money going to come from?
Well, it have nowhere to come from now. Before I was doing the refinance to maintain it, but now I can't anymore.
Felicia James' East Orange home has been on the market for months and not one customer has even looked at it. Her best hope for a buyer would be someone like Richard Constable.
This street that we're on is called Elmwood Drive. And
Constable is a federal prosecutor and real estate investor who knows housing values here in the black majority town of Orange. He knows when it comes to housing prices, race matters.
Folks that are in all of these homes, I mean, look at that, that's probably an 8-bedroom home. They're all African American, all affluent, and with homes ranging from probably 700,000 to about $1 million. If these homes were in Maplewood or South Orange, one of the more affluent towns in Essex County, like a house like that would probably go for about $2 to $3 million.